Did you know that a single lawn ornament could spark a war in your neighborhood? That's exactly what happened when my flamingos were banned by HOA Karen. So, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. We love to see how far our stories reach. I couldn't believe my eyes. As I stepped outside, my heart sank. My lovingly arranged lawn flamingos were missing. Just yesterday, I was proudly displaying them, and now my yard looked barren. Then, Mrs. Jenkins, the notorious HOA Karen, strutted by and smirked. "You thought you could flaunt those tacky things in my neighborhood?" I felt my blood boil. Who was she to dictate my yard? But as I dug into the HOA regulations, I discovered a tangled web of outdated rules and grubby politics. I knew I had to defend my vibrant flamingos, come hell or high water. The next HOA meeting was a showdown. My nerves were a jumble of excitement and anxiety as I clutched the rulebook, ready to confront Mrs. Jenkins. "You can't just bully your way into a pretty neighborhood," I stammered, my heart racing. She shot back, calm and collected. "Aesthetic matters, dear." The room was divided. Some nodded in agreement while others looked at me with pity. My boldness was met with her frosty gaze. I needed a plan. It was time to rally the neighborhood. But would they stand with me against the mighty Karen? I sank into my couch, contemplating how to engage my neighbors. What if we held a fun barbecue? I proposed to my friend Megan. She perked up. "That's brilliant. Everyone loves food." The next day, I posted colorful flyers around the neighborhood, inviting everyone to come together. "Let's bond over grilled burgers and flamingo spirit," I declared. But doubts lurked. What if nobody showed? I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on stoking the excitement. If I could just get my neighbors on my side, I could topple Mrs. Jenkins. Barbecue day arrived, and I wrestled with mounting anticipation and anxiety as the smell of grilled burgers wafted through the air. Neighbors filtered in, laughing and chatting. I saw Mr. Thompson, the retired lawyer, exchanging stories about his own HOA battles. "We should unite against that Karen," he chuckled. I realized then, I wasn't alone. We exchanged plans and dared to dream. Felt electric, an army formed. Then it happened. Mrs. Jenkins pulled up, her expression a mix of disdain and disbelief. My heart raced. Would she come to ruin our fun? Inspired, I decided to take it up a notch. What if we staged a flamingo challenge? I announced, adrenaline coursing through me. "Let's design the best flamingo decor and vote for the winner." Everyone cheered, but Mrs. Jenkins' sharp glare told me she wouldn't back down that easily. "That's nothing but chaos," she bellowed. My excitement was tinged with dread. Was I provoking her wrath? Yet, seeing my friend's smiles fueled my resolve. I would turn her tactics against her. After all, what was a neighborhood without laughter and whimsy? The challenge gained momentum, spreading on social media like wildfire. My phone pinged endlessly as followers flocked to the outrageous posts of colorful flamingo displays. But if there was one thing I knew about Mrs. Jenkins, it was that she thrived on control. Just as I feared, she rallied her supporters, turning their heads with claims of disruption. My phone buzzed with messages of concern and uncertainty. But I would not back down. I had to utilize this whirlwind of attention to level the playing field. I needed a plan that showcased cohesion over chaos. It hit me then. A giant inflatable flamingo that would not only represent our cause, but also scream joy the moment you laid eyes on it.
Heartwarming for inflatable flamingo.
I shouted to my circle, their eyes widening at the absurdity and brilliance of it. "But will it just provoke her more?" someone queried. I had never cared less. I wanted a spectacle, something that would make everyone smile, including my foes. As I set up my backyard for the grand unveiling, laughter and excitement surrounded me. I was stepping into the role of neighborhood champion. Was I ready for the fight to ensue? The inflatable stood tall and proud in my yard, its vibrant pink shades shimmering under the sunlight. I stood in front of it, grinning from ear to ear, feeling triumphant. Yet Mrs. Jenkins wasn't about to let this slide. Within hours, she'd filed her complaint, claiming my flamingo was a dangerous distraction to traffic. I rolled my eyes, heart racing at the absurdity. Was this truly where our neighborhood had landed? The tense anticipation wrapped around me like a thick fog. How could I fight an adversary so seemingly absurd? As the neighborhood assembled for the casual unveiling, the laughter of children rippled through the air. I thought I was winning hearts until Mrs. Jenkins approached with a stone-cold glare. "This chaos needs to stop," she sneered, and I held my breath. But then, someone piped up, "It's just a bit of fun, Karen." The tension shattered as more neighbors chimed in, now emboldened. Then, the unexpected happened. Mrs. Jenkins huffed off, her heels clicking angrily down the street. It was a small victory, but with her waving her white flag in the distance, I felt a new surge of hope. What if I could really make a change? The triumphant vote passed. My Flamingos and Inflatable remained for a 3-month trial period. As I celebrated with my friends, my heart raced, still aware of the storm brewing with Mrs. Jenkins. The moment was bittersweet. She was not the type to back down easily. Just as I took my first blissful sip of soda, I overheard a group of her supporters plotting sabotage at the edge of the yard. I could feel tension rising. Would my joy last? Or was this just the calm before the tempest? I took a deep breath, readying myself for whatever she might try next. Just as I suspected, Mrs. Jenkins wasted no time. She marched down the street the next morning, clipboard in hand, barking out rules to neighbors about proper lawn decorum. "This trial period is madness," she hollered, drawing attention from everyone around. I watched, heart racing. Her words spread like poison among the crowd, creating whispers of doubt. With our newfound hope teetering on the edge, I'd have to rally my supporters again. But would they hold strong in the face of her fierce opposition? Fear crept in. I knew I had to act quickly. Frantically, I planned a community gathering to showcase the positive impact of the Flamingos. "Flamingos bring joy," I proclaimed when evening rolled in and the sun dipped low. My voice filled the air, and I encouraged my neighbors to share their favorite flamingo stories. Laughter echoed around me, but I noticed a few skeptical faces lingering, still loyal to Mrs. Jenkins. I could already sense the rift growing. How could I mend it? After all that work, I had to show everyone this was about community, not just lawn decor. The stakes had never been higher. Encouraged by the laughter, I decided to take my campaign to social media. "Join the Flamingo Fun Challenge," I posted, urging people to share their flamingo memories or designs. But soon, my phone buzzed with messages from Mrs. Jenkins's camp. "This is ridiculous," they scoffed, picking apart our efforts and branding them as juvenile. Each message felt like a dagger, but I wasn't ready to retreat. If anything, I felt even more fueled to display our positivity. But would it be enough to withstand her relentless assault? I needed a plan, and fast. With a heavy heart, I figured out how to combat her negativity head-on. A charity fundraiser to support local organizations. A purpose beyond flamingos. I shouted to my friends, each smiling face lighting up with agreement. Enthusiasm swarmed the room as we brainstormed and organized. "Let's eat, paint flamingos, and share joy." Everyone rallied behind the idea. This was my chance to turn the tide of negativity into something beautiful. I felt the impending tension, knowing Mrs. Jenkins would retaliate. But I was ready to face her. This community needed to thrive together. The day of the fundraiser arrived, and excitement buzzed through the air as we transformed my backyard into a colorful haven of flamingos and goodwill. I greeted neighbors with soft smiles, feeling the warmth of unity. As people mingled, it felt like magic. Just as I thought we'd found our rhythm, Mrs. Jenkins stormed in, laptop in hand, haranguing guests about HOA standards. I fought to keep my cool while my friends rallied around me, creating a protective circle. Her ominous presence loomed over, but I reminded myself, this was for the community. In the end, the fundraiser drew in more attendees than I had ever hoped. Families, friends, new faces, all united in laughter and creativity. I scanned the crowd, noticing Mrs. Jenkins growing increasingly restless as she watched from a distance, furiously jotting down notes. We can't let her ruin our fun, I mouthed to Mr. Thompson, who firmly nodded back. Together we could tackle anything. But as the night blossomed into fun and connection, I felt a tremor of uncertainty. What would happen when our charitable efforts found their way back to Mrs. Jenkins's wrath? After a successful evening, I thought the tide of negativity might finally be turning. I delivered heartfelt remarks, thanking everyone for their support. This will create positive change. I cheered, and they erupted. Yet Mrs. Jenkins remained a storm cloud on the horizon. She'd quietly slipped out the back, but not before someone pointed out her suspiciously empty clipboard. Was she gathering evidence against us? The realization made my stomach drop. I couldn't let my hopes rely on her whims. Something needed to change, and I had to prepare for the fight ahead. With relentless resolve, I contacted Mr. Thompson, sharing my concerns. We need to make sure the HOA knows how much this means to everyone, I insisted. He nodded, a fire burning in his eyes. Action was necessary. We spent the week drafting a proposal showcasing the community's support and the charitable impact we'd made. Soon, I felt information spreading like wildfire. Many were turning to me for inspiration, and the thought warmed my heart. But dread crept in, knowing Mrs. Jenkins was lurking, ready to attack my hard work. I knew her battle was far from over. At the next HOA meeting, I was filled with determination. I took my place in front of the members, clutching a thick stack of testimonials from neighbors about the joy our flamingos brought. "This is about community," I exclaimed, heart pounding as I presented my case. But just as I saw their interest peaked, Mrs. Jenkins jumped in with her testimony. "This is a chaos festival," she thundered. Everyone turned towards her, waiting for the inevitable clash between us. I could feel my pulse quicken. The stakes were high. Would I achieve victory, or would she choke out our shared dreams? The excitement from the fundraising success quickly turned to tension as I realized we had to finalize the new charter. At the subsequent HOA meeting, I stood, heart racing, presenting our vision for a more lighthearted set of guidelines. "We need a neighborhood that embraces creativity," I argued passionately. The room felt electric, but as soon as the words left my mouth, Mrs. Jenkins interrupted with her stockpile of complaints. "This isn't decorum. This is chaos," she bellowed. And just like that, my moment of hope hung in the balance. Would the community support our vision, or would she drag us down? The meeting dragged on, and I could feel my energy waning. Mrs. Jenkins poured fuel on the fire, insisting on her view of proper neighborhood decorum. "You'll ruin property values," she screamed, her voice rising above mine. I watched as some neighbors began to side with her, whispers rippling through the crowd. My palms grew sweaty. I had given it my all, but would it be enough? The stakes escalated with every moment, and as the meeting drew to a close, the vote loomed. Would the charter pass and secure a future for our flamingos? Come vote day, anxiety coursed through me like electricity. The room was divided, with half the audience ready to support change and the other half stalwartly behind Mrs. Jenkins. "This is about community spirit," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. I could see fear in some eyes at the threat of Jenkins' retaliation. Just as the chairperson prepared to call for the vote, Mrs. Jenkins stepped in with a cynical smile. "If this goes through, you'll see a neighborhood in shambles." Ignoring her, I remained determined to focus on the joy our project had birthed and pushed forward. The vote came to pass and I held my breath. "All in favor?" The room echoed. Hands went up cautiously, but as I glanced around, I felt hope rise. Cheers erupted just as Mrs. Jenkins screeched, "I'll not sit quietly." From chaos to victory, our charter passed, emerging surprisingly victorious. Yet, even a win couldn't drown my apprehension for what was to come. I knew Mrs. Jenkins wouldn't take this lightly. The thrill of triumph left me pondering her next move, but for now we celebrated. A brief moment of joy before a storm was bound to hit. As celebrations deemed new hope, I walked into my neighbor's backyard to hear hushed whispers. "She's been planning revenge," someone murmured, and whispers of discontent simmered beneath the surface. I felt my heart sink. This would be no cakewalk. It was clear that Jenkins wouldn't just give up. Fear gripped my mind as I glanced at our beautiful flamingo, a stinging reminder of the impending battle. What's her next strike? I asked Megan, panic rising within me. We need a plan. This was more than just about lawn decor. It was about community spirit and our sanity. Would we all stand strong together? The following week felt heavy with dread, and tension simmered in the air. My phone buzzed with messages about Mrs. Jenkins' campaign against our new charter circulating around. She'll drive us out for good, one stated. It stung, but I couldn't let fear paralyze us. I called an emergency neighborhood meeting to reinforce our solidarity. When the day came, I scanned the room, seeing the familiar faces ready to fight alongside me. Together, we've brought joy, I reminded everyone. But doubts lingered in those frightened eyes. Would they really stand firm when the winds of challenge blew strong? As the meeting continued, neighbors shared their concerns and fears. Mrs. Jenkins' influence was palpable, and several expressed worry that she might sabotage our beloved flamingos. I felt on edge, my frustration soaring. That's what she wants, I exclaimed, tensions dividing us. Suddenly, a neighbor's idea rang out like a beacon. What if we held a Flamingo Festival to show her the power of unity? Laughter rippled through the crowd, excited chatter igniting the room. We felt ready to light our flame against the chaos she had become. Would this festival be the answer to solidifying our bonds? Planning the Flamingo Festival spiraled into an incredible whirlwind of creativity, bringing the neighborhood together. I watched as families crafted colorful decorations and designed their flamingos. But just as excitement bubbled, a shocking twist came when we found one of our flamingos vandalized the night before the festival. This can't be happening, I gasped, staring in disbelief. My heart sank as I shared this news with my friends. Could this be Mrs. Jenkins' doing? The lingering question filled the air and fueled my determination. We had to still show our resilience and not let her antics rip apart our festive spirit. The day of the Flamingo Festival dawned bright and cheerful, despite the chaos that had come before. I stood proudly among tables of vibrant crafts and cheerful games, and I could feel the energy of the neighborhood coursing through me. But in the crowd, Mrs. Jenkins appeared lurking at the edge, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the festivities. My pulse quickened. Would she strike again? I knew I couldn't let fear engulf me. As I took a deep breath, I approached her, my heart pounding. Is there something you'd like to share, Mrs. Jenkins? I asked firmly but politely. To my surprise, she responded with a dismissive scoff. You're wasting everyone's time, Alex. Frustration bubbled inside me, but I refused to let her ruin our joy. No, we're building community, I shot back, and for once, the neighbors rallied behind me, shouting words of encouragement that filled the air. Mrs. Jenkins clenched her fists, clearly agitated. I thought I might win, until she threatened to call the police. My heart raced anew. What had I gotten myself into? Could this festival truly salvage our vibrancy? Or was it a magnet for trouble that would only embolden her? When the festival finally came to a close, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph owned by the unity of our neighborhood. Surrounded by vibrant flamingos, laughter echoed, but Mrs. Jenkins' lingering presence weighed heavy on my mind. Would there be a storm brewing? Let's celebrate, I urged. Yet, I felt tingling anxiety. I knew we had to watch our backs. I gathered everyone for a final toast to celebrate our hard work, but just then my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Thompson. I spotted Jenkins lurking near the park. Stay alert. It brought my heart to a standstill. The festival hadn't left us unscathed, as the community was buzzing with anticipation for what was to come, and the threat of Mrs. Jenkins was ever present. Can you believe she tried to ruin our fun? Someone exclaimed as we packed up. I nodded, adrenaline coursing through me. Our joy surged in the face of adversity. We can't let her win, I insisted. But deeper beneath the surface, I felt anxious about whether Mrs. Jenkins would face consequences for her relentless antics. This fight had become more than about flamingos. I could sense it was an uphill battle not easily won. Gradually, I began to channel my energies into drafting a final petition against Mrs. Jenkins' reckless tactics. Fueled by community support, I gathered signatures to present to the HOA, armed with testimonials of everyone's positive experiences. It felt liberating, a chance to reclaim what we had created together. But with the ongoing threat of Mrs. Jenkins, I doubted my persistence. Would our determination withstand her relentless grip? All at once, I cast my fears aside. We had become a force to be reckoned with, and I knew we had to finish this narrative once and for all. Will our community find the strength to stand together against the storm that is Mrs. Jenkins, or will her relentless grip on tradition snuff out our joy? As we face this battle for our flamingos and our neighborhood spirit, I want to hear from you. How would you rally your community in the face of opposition? Share your thoughts in the comments below.